Our common perception of a medieval witch often conjures images of pointy hats, bubbling cauldrons, and a fiery end at the hands of the Inquisition. But what was their real life like? Did you truly have a chance of being burned at the stake in the Middle Ages? In which witches lived long, happy lives pursuing their passions? Before we delve into these questions, I'd like to share some exciting news. We've heard your feedback on sound quality and invested in a new microphone. We hope you'll enjoy it. By the way, I found the perfect microphone using the e-catalog service. It allowed me to sort through stores and find the best price. Don't confuse e-catalog with an online store. It's a comprehensive product selection service covering electronics, car accessories, children's items, and much more. It also features video reviews and articles, which is incredibly convenient. Plus, your catalog is now available in Kazakhstan. You can find the link in the description. Mary Bradbury, an atypical Salem witch. Meet Mary Bradbury. She didn't own a pointy hat, nor did she keep frog skins or mandrake root at home. She even attended church regularly. Nevertheless, in 1692, she was condemned as a witch in the small village of Salem, USA, founded by her ancestors, early Puritan settlers from England. While 1692 falls outside the conventional understanding of the Middle Ages, we'll adhere to the long Middle Ages theory of the French School of Historiography, which extends to the 18th century and the French Revolution. Old Salem was known for its strict puritanical customs. Mary seemed to have achieved all her dreams. She married her beloved, and they owned a farm. Life was a beautiful fairy tale until it turned into a nightmare. Strange occurrences began in Pastor Paris's home. His daughter and niece developed a mysterious, terrifying illness. The teenagers behaved as if possessed, contorting into strange poses, covering their ears when the pastor read prayers, and complaining that they were constantly pricked with pins or knives. Most chillingly, the girls claimed that evil spirits commanded them at the behest of witches. The entire town was terrified. Soon after, another 12-year-old girl, Ann Putnam, fell ill. A doctor was called and delivered his verdict. The cause of the illness was a witch. The frenzied town rushed to find her. The first suspect was Pastor Paris's servant, Tituba, whom the girls pointed out. Tituba was African and practiced fortune-telling. She was arrested. Meanwhile, the number of girls with similar symptoms grew to 7. Under pressure, Tituba began to implicate others, possibly to avoid punishment. The residents of Salem then concluded they were dealing with a vast witch conspiracy. Which criteria? Who fell under suspicion? So how did one identify a witch among fellow citizens? Female gender. If you were a woman, you were already under suspicion. In the Middle Ages, it was believed that women were more sinful than men and more susceptible to dark forces. Although men were also accused of witchcraft, statistics undeniably show that the overwhelming majority of those condemned were women. Wealth and independence. Wealthy and independent women were feared. It's no surprise that nearly 90% of those accused of witchcraft in New England between 1620 and 1721 were adult, successful, independent women without husbands, sons, or brothers. Poverty. However, the poor also fell under suspicion. For instance, one of the first arrested in Salem was the beggar Sarah Good, whom neighbors distrusted. Who else could be a witch if not her? Age. If you lived to old age, it could be suspicious. Yet youth offered no guarantee against accusations of dealing with the devil. Sarah's daughter, Dorothy Good, was just 4 years old when she confessed to witchcraft. Gathering in groups. In those days, it was best for women not to gather to chat. A group of women meeting without men could be mistaken for a coven worshiping the devil. In general, it was advisable not to make friends, as a quarrel could lead to an accusation. Notorious witch hunters. Figures like Matthew Hopkins or John Stern instilled such terror that women accused others to protect themselves. Rejected men. A spurned man could easily file a complaint against you. Certain professions. Some professions were considered particularly suspect. Midwives were often accused of dealing with the devil. Their social and family status, independence, pagan influences, and knowledge of herbs all worked against them. It was considered an unclean and demeaning profession, and such women, in society's view, simply had to be in league with the devil. Knowledge and intellect. Women with specific knowledge were condemned by men and evoked fear and suspicion in society. Excessive or complete absence of children. Too many children? It was the result of black magic. No children at all? You were cursed. Birthmarks. Birthmarks were also a bad sign. Independent, bold character. Any act of defiance could lead to an accusation of witchcraft. For example, in Salem, the respectable churchgoer Rachel Clinton became a victim of the witch hunt. In her trial, it was testified against her. Does she not behave like a spiteful, nagging, rude woman? Is that not the character of a witch? Does she not curse, threaten, and pick fights? Appearance. You were a witch if you were ugly or had a physical deformity. But you were also a witch if, on the contrary, you were beautiful. A resident of medieval German Würzburg wrote that the most beautiful, modest young woman was burned in the city last week because she was certainly a witch. Devil's Mark. Many legends circulated about the Devil's Mark, a small spot on the accused body that was the only place where the person felt no pain. It was always sought out during agonizing tortures with pins or hot irons. Modern scientists have put forward an interesting theory. Such spots could appear due to leprosy. Thus, society was terrifyingly ridding itself of the sick. The Salem trials, a snowball of fear. Let's return to Salem, where a real witch hunt unfolded. The girls pointed to more and more witches who were imprisoned and, under torture, confessed to crimes and implicated others. Facts were used as evidence against the accused. Sarah Good was a beggar, and Sarah Osborne was a widow, and both had not attended church for a long time. Events began to spiral. 3 more women were arrested, including Martha Corey, who was accused of dealing with the devil simply because she initially distrusted the pastor's daughter and niece's testimonies and scoffed at the trials. All those arrested were devout churchgoers. It was then that the residents of Salem began to realize the horror unfolding around them. The following month, several more women, and for the first time, several men were arrested. Mary Bradbury and everyone around her were genuinely terrified by the witch hunt that had erupted. Then, 12-year-old Ann Putnam claimed that the ghost of a minister had appeared to her, choking and frightening her. So, George Burroughs, a respected pastor, was declared the head of a coven of witches. Those detained, about 30 by then, began to testify against him under torture. He was accused of organizing witch sabbaths and bewitching soldiers, causing them to suffer defeats by the Native Americans. Everyone was shocked, and then trouble came to Mary's home. The girls pointed to her as well. They claimed she appeared to them in visions. The modest and charming Mary Bradbury was seized and thrown into prison. The accusation claimed that this witch could transform into various animals, make milk sour, and cause women to disobey their husbands. Quite enough to die. Trials and proof of guilt. All accused, like Mary, were thoroughly examined. Any birthmark was already proof of a secret connection with the devil. Then, witches were ordered to be cruelly tortured because, according to medieval instructions, they could endure various ordeals for a long time with the help of the devil. A sure way to confirm a witch's guilt was to throw her into water, bound. Witches, after all, don't drown. And if she drowned, well, fortunately, she was an honest woman and would be posthumously acquitted. It was also ordered to dislocate the joints of the accused. Witches were supposed to be able to effortlessly put them back in place. Suspects of witchcraft were tested with milk. If milk or butter was near a woman and soon soured, then she was definitely a witch. Of course, no one even mentioned how products were stored or their shelf life. In Salem, such a test was used as proof of guilt. The suspect, blindfolded, was led to the girls. When they began to have fits, and if the woman's touch did not calm them, then she was a witch. The most interesting thing was that when the mother of one of the girls asked why she was slandering her neighbors, the girl directly said it was for fun, but then, frightened, returned to the witchcraft story. Mary, like any ordinary person, had several birthmarks. The test with the girls also confirmed she was a witch. Her fate was sealed, death by hanging. The scale of the female Holocaust and its causes. The Middle Ages were a challenging time for women. For almost 4 centuries, from the late 14th to the second half of the 18th century, bonfires blazed across Europe. Thousands of innocent people, after horrific tortures, met a gruesome death. Historians have even begun to speak of a genuine female Holocaust. For a long time, researchers believed that the number of victims amounted to millions. For example, the German physician Gustav Veit in 1791, relying on certain calculations, reported that the number of executed witches worldwide was almost 9.5 million. In a respected study of the last century, Russell Hope Robbins wrote about 200,000 hanged and tortured between 1450 and 1750. In recent decades, however, many studies have cast doubt on even this number of victims of the witch hunt. The historian William Monter, after examining 35,000 documents on witch trials, speaks of no more than 75,000 victims, and the German researcher Wolfgang Behringer of 60,000. The American Brian Levack even reduces the figure of those executed to 45,000. Of course, these are still gigantic numbers, representing the lives of innocent women and their unborn children. In reality, things are far from as simple as they seem. The Middle Ages were a time when magicians, alchemists, and sorcerers flourished at royal courts. But with witches, it was a completely different story. Magic was considered a kind of science, but witches were not. That was pure dealing with the devil. What caused the witchcraft panic that swept across Europe and the New World? Researchers offer various theories. According to one, the culprit was bread contaminated with ergot, which caused mass hallucinations. Another suggests a specific type of encephalitis, which can also cause hallucinations. Scientists even blame the weather. At the turn of the 16th and 17th centuries, a little ice age set in, leading to a climate deterioration. The colder temperatures brought epidemics, crop failures, and famine, which were seen as the machinations of witches and sorcerers. But there's another theory. Witches actually existed, but people mistook ancient pagan rituals performed by women for witch sabbaths. With the advent of Christianity, ancient gods came to be seen as demons. Yet European peasants secretly continued to revere them. To this day, the church has not been able to eradicate belief in supernatural beings who were once pagan gods: elves, gnomes, trolls, and fairies. In almost every medieval community, there was at least one elderly woman revered for her wisdom and her skills as a midwife or herbalist. It was to her, not to the priest, that people first turned for advice on matters such as weather and harvest, well-being, personal health and hygiene, conception and childbirth. Moreover, according to one hypothesis, the very witches persecuted by the inquisitors were priestesses of the ancient pagan mother goddess, who embodied Mother Nature. The worship of the great goddess dates back to the Stone Age. A number of anthropologists believe that the mother goddess was humanity's first deity, who birthed the universe and the entire world. In 1984, the American psychiatrist Bolin suggested that the great goddess, represented by the archetypes of various Greek goddesses, continues to play a leading role in the female subconscious. The fortunate witches and Mary's fate. Nevertheless, there were indeed real witches who lived long and happy lives, continuing to pursue their passions. Some managed to charm the inquisitors with their feminine allure. Others had influential patrons, and some simply had services that were indispensable. For example, the legendary Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen, who lived in the early 19th century. Stories of her power spread throughout New Orleans. She was feared and revered. The local clergy, of course, hated her and tried to bring her to trial several times. However, her connections in high society always saved her, and officials visiting the city would always come to pay their respects. She lived to be 87, still practicing and inspiring both dread and respect. Lady Alice Kittler became the first officially recognized witch in Ireland in the 14th century, condemned and sentenced to execution. All four of her husbands had died suddenly, leaving her their fortunes. During a search of Alice's parents' home, numerous magical potions and powders used in black magic were discovered. Bishop Richard de la Drade ordered the witch imprisoned and declared her the head of a coven of sorcerers and heretics, even claiming she kept an incubus at home. However, the beautiful Irish woman escaped, using all her connections. She managed to have the bishop himself thrown into prison. Upon his release, he only managed to have Lady Bluebeard's servant burned at the stake, her son declared a heretic and sent on a penitential pilgrimage, and Alice herself declared a witch. But Lady Alice was already in England, far from Irish justice, and lived happily ever after. Agnes Sherwood, known as the Witch of Fear, managed her own plantation, healed with herbs, and horrifyingly even swam in 40-degree heat. As a result, although she was declared a witch, she was released from prison after 8 years. Rumor has it that she saved either the wife or daughter of Mayor Pergan. She even reclaimed her lands, which had been seized by the neighbor who accused her, and lived to a ripe old age, continuing her practice. Mary Bradbury's return. In May 1692, the Salem witch trials began. Hundreds of Mary Bradbury's neighbors spoke in her defense, but despite their testimonies, she was found guilty of witchcraft and sentenced to execution. The same fate befell the unfortunate pastor, who recited a prayer flawlessly before his hanging, which, according to popular belief, a sorcerer could not do. But even this did not help. He was hanged, along with several other women. Before our heroine's execution, the beggar woman, one of the first to be accused, was to be hanged. With the noose already around her neck, she promised the clergyman involved in the trial, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. Take my life, and the Lord will give you blood to drink." To the horror of the Salem residents, this prophecy soon came true. The clergyman died suddenly, bleeding from his mouth before his death. What caused the Salem tragedy? Scholars have suggested mass poisoning of the girls, causing hallucinations, and Huntington's disease, similar in described symptoms, and encephalitis. Some insisted that the girls simply lied. Today, unraveling this mystery is as difficult as answering what caused the witch hunt in the Middle Ages. It should be noted that this mass female Holocaust did not affect Russia, the end of the nightmare, and Mary's legacy. Let's return to Mary, who was awaiting her execution in prison. Her young husband, with the help of friends, gathered a significant sum and personally smuggled her out of prison in a laundry basket. They moved to another state and learned with horror what was happening back in Salem. Over 200 people were imprisoned there on charges of dealing with the devil. 14 women and 5 men were hanged, 1 old man was pressed to death with stones, and 5 people died in prison. The witch hunt spilled beyond Salem's borders. The girls even traveled to other towns to find those possessed by the devil. However, everything abruptly ended when they implicated the governor's wife. He immediately ordered a halt to the persecutions and annulled the trials, and later the victims were rehabilitated. The girls themselves suffered no ill consequences for their actions. Only one of them, Ann Putnam, wrote a letter of repentance 14 years later, claiming she had been possessed by the devil and had slandered people. After the witch hunt ended, Mary and her husband returned to Salem and lived in love and harmony. Mrs. Bradbury lived to be 85 and passed away peacefully in her bed, surrounded by numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Incidentally, she is a direct embodiment of the idea of how many great people humanity lost due to witch hunts. Among Mary's descendants are the famous writer Ray Bradbury, one of the most prominent thinkers, poets, and writers of the USA, Ralph Waldo Emerson, astronaut Alan Shepard, and actress Linda Hamilton. Yes, the very Sarah Connor from Terminator. And all of them might not have been born if not for their distant ancestor, in love with his young wife. There's just one but. Mary's descendants also included some of the first American mediums, the Eddy brothers, who claimed they could hear spirits and enter trances. So, perhaps in Mary Bradbury's story, not everything is as straightforward as it seems.